Okay, let's dive in. We live in a world that is just, well, it's loud.
So much noise all the time.
Constant notifications, feed scrolling forever, the sheer pace of everything.
Mm,
Finding a moment of genuine stillness, it feels almost impossible sometimes.
definitely. Let alone finding space for, creativity or even just healing.
How do we even navigate that? It's a real question.
It is. It feels like this constant tension in modern life, doesn't it? The outside world just wants to grab your attention.
All the time, pulling us away from ourselves.
Exactly.
Which is precisely why this project we're looking at today, really, well, it caught our eye. It's called Still Point.
From an organization called TATANKA.
Yeah. And we're digging into this one source document that really explains their whole approach.
Yeah.
It's quite unique.
Mm-hmm. It presents Still Point not just as like background music, but as a very intentional environment, almost a technology for your inner world.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack how Still Point aims to be this sonic portal, they call it.
For creative flow, meditation, healing.
Right. By blending sound science, some really specific ambient design choices, and, well, a kind of spiritual intention.
All right.
So let's unpack this.
Where should we start? The science bit.
Yeah, let's start there, the science they're building on.
Okay. So what's fascinating here is how they're deliberately going after a very specific brain state.
Using sound frequency, right?
Exactly. The core idea is brainwave entrainment, basically using sound to gently guide your brainwaves.
And the source mentions they mainly do this with a binaural beat. It calls it a perceptual audio illusion. Sounds kind of mystical, but it's actual science.
Oh yeah, totally science. Here's how it works, basically. You need headphones,
Okay.
and they play a slightly different pure tone in each ear. The example in the source is 100 hertz in one ear and 102.5 hertz in the other. Now, your brain doesn't just hear two tones, it actually calculates the difference.
And creates a third tone.
Kind of. It's a phantom tone inside your head at the frequency of that difference. So in this case, 2.5 hertz.
Oh, okay. So you're not actually hearing 2.5 hertz through the headphones because that's too low.
Right. Your brain generates it internally from the signals it is getting.
And 2.5 hertz, that frequency puts us in the delta brainwave range.
Precisely. Delta waves are the really slow ones, typically like 0.5 to 4 hertz.
Usually associated with deep sleep, like dreamless sleep.
That's the common association, yeah. These really deep unconscious states.
So the big question then is, if it targets deep sleep brainwaves, how can you use it for being creative or meditating when you're awake?
And that's the really clever part, according to the source. While delta is linked to sleep, it's also tied to other pretty profound states.
Like what?
Things like cellular regeneration, emotional integration, even ego dissolution.
Wow.
The key thing is, Still Point is designed to gently activate these delta states, but without necessarily knocking you out.
Oh, okay.
It's about accessing those benefits, that kind of consciousness, while you stay aware.
So it's different from meditation tracks aiming for, say, theta, which is more like light trance, or alpha for relaxation.
Exactly. Delta operates kind of below our usual thinking layers.
Below the chatter.
Right. So the idea is, by getting to that level, you might access intuition or subconscious memories, maybe process stuff that's usually buried, all while staying present.
So it's more than just chill out music. It's positioned as a neurological tool.
That's the term they use, yeah. And they frame it as being particularly useful for things like trauma recovery, maybe sleep therapy, emotional processing.
Because it gets to those deep states gently.
Exactly, in a non-invasive way.
And this whole scientific approach, it's part of TATANKA's bigger picture, this AUDI initiative.
The source mentions this blend: sound science, indigenous wisdom, and AI-enhanced sound design.
Feels like they're pulling from very different worlds there.
It suggests a philosophy where, the hard science of sound and maybe more ancient, intuitive ways of knowing about sound, they're seen as connected.
A holistic view, maybe?
Something like that. How sound really impacts us, body and mind.
Okay, so that's the science setting the stage, neurologically speaking. The 2.5 hertz delta beat. But what does it actually sound like? This brings us to the art, the design choices.
Yeah, and this part is really interesting, quite distinctive. The sounds around that subtle binaural beat, they use only acoustic instruments.
Wait, really? No synths? No digital pads like you hear in most ambient stuff?
None. It's a very deliberate choice. The source says the intention is an earthy, grounded soundscape.
Earthy and grounded.
Yeah, trying to mimic sounds from natural environments our nervous systems evolved to trust. Like forests, maybe the feeling of being in a womb, caves, water.
So the idea is these organic sounds resonate with something really deep and primal in us, creating this warm, lo-fi ambience that connects with, what did the source call it, somatic memory.
Yeah, like body intelligence, memory held in the body itself.
Mm.
And the document really emphasizes the philosophy here. It says this is not sound design for entertainment. It is ceremonial and somatic design.
Ceremonial and somatic? That's different.
Totally. The focus isn't on like catchy melodies or typical harmonies. It says every harmonic decision is made not for melody, but for resonance.
Resonance.
It's how it sits in the nervous system, in the body, and in the inner self.
Wow. So it's judged by its physical and emotional effect, not just if it sounds nice.
Precisely. And that focus shapes the structure, too. The compositions are described as slow, nonlinear, and non-rhythmic.
Slow, nonlinear, non-rhythmic. So no beat, no predictable patterns.
Nope, no verse chorus, nothing like that.
That seems almost anti-music in a way. How does that help?
Well, the thinking is, by taking away those time-based cues, the regular beats and patterns, it helps you disconnect from the clock-watching, deadline-driven world. It disarms the cognitive over-control that often impedes inspiration.
It stops your brain from trying to figure it out and predict what's next.
Kind of. It encourages this surrender into stillness. Our brains want patterns, right? This gently frustrates that, pushing you into a different way of just being.
Like it's trying to quiet that analytical part of the mind. The source uses this metaphor, a sonic temple, prioritizing presence over productivity.
That nails it, I think. It's an environment for being, not doing. And they're aiming for this specific balance. It soothes without sedating and inspires without stimulating.
Okay, that's a fine line. Soothing but not sleepy, inspiring but not distracting.
Exactly. It's meant to be a container, a space for flow, for introspection, but without pushing you around.
Okay, so we've got the delta frequency opening up these deep states.
Essentially, yeah.
And then this organic, nonlinear soundscape creating a kind of safe, resonant space. So how is still point actually used? What are the applications?
Well, the source is pretty clear. It was designed with creators in mind.
Artists?
Yeah, visual artists, musicians, dancers, writers. It's meant to be like a foundational ambient layer for their work.
And how does it supposedly help creativity? What's the mechanism there?
The idea connects back to the delta state. By accessing that deeper level, the theory is it silences the inner critic.
That voice that's always judging.
Exactly. The one that edits ideas before they even get out properly. Yeah. The source suggests this lets raw subconscious inspiration to surface.
So still point becomes like a collaborator with your subconscious?
Kind of, yeah. A co-creator for your deeper creative voice. They even give examples.
Like what?
Like visual artists might find their strokes get smoother, compositions freer. Writers might tap into more symbolic language, metaphors. Dancers might move more intuitively.
It's like bypassing the mental sensor to get to the raw stuff. Makes sense.
And the uses go beyond just making art. It's also used in therapeutic settings, spiritual contexts.
Right, like a ritual aid.
Yeah, for things like energy sessions, somatic therapy, dream work, even spiritual journeying.
I noticed it specifically mentioned suitability for trauma-sensitive practices. Why is that highlighted?
That goes back to the design. The lack of narrative, the lack of strong rhythm or melody. That's key. Well, sometimes music with a clear beat or emotional arc can inadvertently trigger difficult feelings or memories, especially for trauma survivors. It can kind of hijack their experience.
Okay, I see.
Stillpoint's design aims to provide a safe, neutral field. It stays in the background, letting the listener's own process happen without being directed or potentially triggered by the sound itself. It's just holding space.
A container, not a script. That feels really important for trauma work.
Absolutely.
And the name Stillpoint, that obviously connects to a deeper idea, too.
Yeah, the source brings up the concept of the sacred pause.
What's that exactly?
It's this idea you find in lots of traditions. That tiny moment of quiet, like between the inhale and exhale or thought and no thought.
A gap.
Yeah, a space where maybe the soul turns inward, or as the source poetically puts it, where the veil thins. A point of pure potential, maybe?
Almost outside of normal time.
Something like that. And Stillpoint is presented as a kind of gateway into those states of inner stillness.
Where creativity isn't forced, it's just revealed.
Exactly. Uncovered, not manufactured.
That really ties the creative and the spiritual aspects together beautifully. Okay, let's zoom out a bit now. Let's look at TATANKA, the organization behind this, their bigger vision. Because the source shares this really powerful story that seems to bring it all together.
Right. TATANKA's whole philosophy is summed up in this phrase, music meets mission.
Music meets mission.
And it involves that mix again. Sound science, indigenous wisdom, and AI-enhanced sound design. Plus, they explicitly mention aligning with DEI principles, diversity, equity, inclusion, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals.
So it's not just about sound, it's about impact in the world.
Definitely. And Still Point is one project, but they also mention another called Orchestra Americana.
What's that one about?
It's described as a living ritual. It uses AI composition, but guided by indigenous knowledge, and crucially, they don't perform in fancy concert halls.
Where do they perform?
Community spaces. Places like community gardens, abandoned mosques, women's shelters, refugee camps, even open-air forest domes.
Wow. Just hearing those locations tells you a lot about their intention, who they're trying to reach.
Exactly, and this leads directly into the story of Safina Gulbahar.
Tell us about her.
Her story is, it's really central in this document. She's introduced as a queer, neurodivergent, Kurdish Palestinian woman. Grew up with the noise of conflict, survival.
So probably not someone naturally drawn to, like, typical ambient music.
Right. She was initially very skeptical of Orchestra Americana, saw music maybe as something used by oppressors or just frivolous entertainment.
Which makes total sense given her background.
Completely. But then she experienced it, and something shifted. Profoundly.
What happened?
The source describes her putting on the headphones, expecting music maybe, but instead she heard these ancient textures.
Ancient textures.
Yeah, like a bowed string sounding like breath, a wind instrument like sand blowing, and underneath it all, that 2.5 hertz pulse.
The still point frequency.
Which she felt, she said, like the Earth's heartbeat.
Yeah.
And it just drew her inward.
Wow. So the science, the specific frequency, combined with those earthy acoustic sounds, it resonated on a really deep level for her.
Viscerally, personally. She found sanctuary in that sound. That's the word used.
Sanctuary.
And she felt she could bring her whole self there, her hijab, her pronouns, her trauma, her tenderness. The space felt safe enough for all of it.
That's incredible.
And her audition story is amazing, too. She didn't play an instrument. She sang this traditional mourning song, just poured her grief into it.
And the AI, what did it do?
This is key. The source says the AI didn't correct her pitch. It followed.
It followed her.
Yeah, it followed the emotion, the shape of her grief in the song. And later, in a live performance for domestic violence survivors, the AI apparently subtly shifted the delta frequencies slightly down to 2.2 hertz, as if it was sensing and responding to the collective emotional resonance in the room.
Okay, that's a really different way of thinking about AI and music. Not directing, but listening.
Yeah.
Responding.
Exactly, supporting the human experience.
So what was the impact on the audience, on Safina?
Well, during that performance for survivors, the source mentions this moment where one woman just burst into tears, reaching for her throat.
Oh, wow.
As if she was finding her voice again. It really points to the potential for deep emotional release.
And the fact that the performances end in silence, not applause.
Right. That totally fits the still point idea. Honoring that inner state the sound helped create.
Shifting the focus inward.
Yeah, from performance to experience. And Safina's life apparently changed quite a bit. She started integrating different spiritual practices and eventually became a traveling archivist for TATANKA.
An archivist?
Yeah, her project is called Echoes of the Margins. She documents the stories, the oral histories of other marginalized artists whose lives were changed by sound.
So her work now directly reflects that mission of sanctuary and giving voice.
Perfectly. And her core message, which she apparently shared on a podcast mentioned in the source, it's really powerful.
What did she say?
She talked about sound as sanctuary, about using AI not to dominate, but to listen. And she said something like, the very frequencies dismissed as background were the ones restoring the soul.
Wow. The background frequencies restoring the soul.
Yeah. And her final thought is just, it hits home. The still point isn't the absence of noise. It's the place where we hear ourselves again.
The place where we hear ourselves again. That's beautiful.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, Safina's story really shows what TATANKA seems to be aiming for.
How so?
It shows how this intentional blend, ancient wisdom, modern tech, acoustic resonance, can create these inclusive, trauma-informed spaces. Spaces where people, especially those often overlooked, can find healing, find themselves. It really drives home that idea of sound as sanctuary when it's designed with humility and focused on resonance.
So, wrapping this up,
Yeah.
what does this all mean for you listening to this right now?
It's
My point is, this document describes it. It really seems to bring together science, spirit, and sound in a pretty unique package.
Yeah, it acts as a potential biological doorway through the brainwave science. It creates this organic and immersive environment with the acoustic design,
Right.
and it serves as a dynamic tool for maybe cultivating presence, clarity, authenticity in your own life.
The source sums it up so well at the end. In a world of noise, still point offers silence with structure, rest with resonance.
Silence with structure, rest with resonance.
It's presented as more than a soundtrack. It's a return to the source.
It really challenges that simple idea that stillness is just, quiet. It suggests it's about creating a specific kind of inner space. And that sound, designed really carefully, maybe even ceremonially, can help create that.
So maybe think about Safina's story. Finding that sanctuary, that resonance, in a space that listened instead of trying to make her fit in. What does it mean to seek resonance rather than assimilation in our own lives?
That's a deep question. Or how might deliberately seeking out that kind of silence with structure, maybe through something like this, or just finding your own version, how might that change your relationship with creativity or with rest?
Or simply with that possibility Safina talked about.
Yeah.
The possibility of hearing ourselves again amongst all the noise, something to think about.